Why aren't you as concerned as some people like Eliezer Yudkowsky or Geoffrey Hinton that AI will destroy humanity or at least make our lives quite miserable?
Well, first thing that is a strange thing to say is that there is, of course, an above 0% chance of the risks around AI. And most people would prefer to hear a 0% chance risk. But the question, and you break risks into a couple different things. You break risk into so-called existential risk. Yudkowsky, Hinton, and others. Um, X risk is frequently, and then risks that are, you know, societal displacement in jobs, inability to adjust, kind of cognitively, a set of other things in terms of this. So I'll take them and there is above zero in both of them. Now let's start with the X risk part. So on the X risk part, the mistake that a lot of the doomers, and they call themselves this. I'm not I'm not throwing them under the bus. This is one of the things in Superagency. It was like, doomers and gloomers and bloomers and zoomers. The they say, well, can you guarantee me that we're not going to either create a robotic species that will, kind of be Terminator-esque, or by accident do something? And it's like, nope. In human life and these things, you can't guarantee. And they say, well, then it's terrible. You should just completely, like you forbid it. And you're like, well, that's if you were thinking that the add-in of a existential risk is the only factor. It's actually humanity faces a portfolio of existential risks. And part of that portfolio is, kind of climate change and nuclear war and pandemics, both man-made and natural. And there's a stack of these things that could create kind of existential risks. And AI does, at its full-bodied form, add into that both in human directed and in itself. But when I look at the entire portfolio of existential risks, and you say, well, um, even AI as it's being built today, as it's happening, or as you imagine, is like, well, what happens to the overall portfolio of existential risks is the actual right way to analyze this. And of course, we want to minimize the amount that AI contributes to additional accidental risk. That is a good thing to do. But also, I think it already intrinsically minimizes a bunch of things. It minimizes pandemics massively, because the only way I can really think to defend against the kind of man-made biological terrorism risk is with AI. Asteroid risk, in terms of really being able to identify and do something about it. Climate change, I actually think it's in the positive category on a number of different arenas, and go into that in whatever depth, your guys' audience would want. But so that's the reason why, within an existential risk, I am a positive. And, then folks say, well, should we go very slow in order to minimize any additional and everything else? And it's like, well, part of the challenge of this is not only are the other existential risks still really there, so the speed at which you move towards, kind of reducing the overall portfolio matters, but also one of the things that gets to this is that the AI revolution is for a number of very, almost like, call it physics, structural economics reasons, being built by the commercial sector, by companies competing with companies, by industries competing with industries, by countries competing with countries, but all being driven that way. And given that human beings divide into group and compete, and by the way, part of the way they compete is also in questions of ideology, perceptual framework. Like, one of the things that I find most entertaining is intellectuals. I hope to be one and aspire to be one in various ways. But intellectuals say, if I just explain this one idea, everyone will agree with me. And it's like, have you ever seen that work any time in human history? Right? Like, so if I go up and say AI is an existential risk, we should all slow down, and 8 billion people in the world go kumbaya, let's slow down. That's not actually, in fact, the way it really happens. So Your speed question when it comes to the existential risk question is to say, well, how do we steer it? Not how do we slow it down? And that's where it's useful for existential risk people to contribute. And too few of them do because they're just all hung up on the Terminator.